This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Well, investors continue to pile into safe haven assets today as COVID-19 cases soar globally. Stocks in emerging markets extended declines today into a fourth session, with MSCI's index falling 0.2% on the day. It did extend losses into a fourth straight session. Now, the index has lost nearly 3% over the past 3 days and has nearly lost all of its gains so far this year. Meanwhile, on the continent, while most key markets remain closed for the Eid holidays, South Africa's JSE extended Tuesday's gains after a positive U.S. session overnight saw markets regaining ground after Monday's sell-off. Of course, all major indices were up today. Now, also coming up on today's show. Large truck operators lose nearly 30,000 trips due to looting in South Africa. UK borrowing leads to record interest payments. And Nigeria launches a leather policy to boost earnings in the sector. Well, tonight we start off in South Africa. More than 3/4 of transport vehicles in KwaZulu-Natal were unable to travel, with large operators delaying or cancelling nearly 30,000 trips. Now, this comes amid violence and widespread looting that broke out after the jailing of ex-President Jacob Zuma. Vehicle tracking and fleet management company Netstar adds that 3 large clients have lost more than 613,000 kilometers of travel in just 5 days. Now, this is equivalent to circumnavigating the globe about 15 times. The average number of trips returned to near normal levels, however, and that was towards the end of the week in most provinces. And still in South Africa, emerging wine producers fear the worst for their businesses under the country's 4th alcohol ban. South Africa is fighting a third wave of COVID with a more severe Delta variant circulating. Now, renewed restrictions were implemented in June, placing the country on alert level 4. The restrictions included a 4th ban on all liquor sales and trade in the country. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
Suwela Masocha spent years studying and learning about wine. In 2018, she took the plunge and opened her own brewery. Little did she know of what would happen in just 2 years.
We have a lot of operational costs that we have, even as a small producer. But if we're not trading, because most of us actually do rely on, everyday trading. So if I'm not selling, I'm not able to generate revenue. I don't have any savings, even as a business. So it means that we can't pay our employees as well. So if I can't pay rent for, my business, it means that I need to close down. So it is really devastating. And we've also had to cut down on our staffs. I'm also an employee of my own company, so I'm also not able to pay myself.
Like Suwela, hundreds of smaller and new emerging winemakers are being forced to make some tough decisions. The liquor bans are meant to clear hospital space for those infected with COVID. South Africa has a poor history when it comes to alcohol abuse and violence. While she understands the ban, she is also watching her demise in this industry. Suwela opened this tasting room in March this year, but it has remained mostly closed due to the liquor bans. Suwela's winery is hanging on its last thread. She says if this latest ban is extended or if there is another ban to come, she will have to close shop completely. She's already considered our options outside of winemaking.
Considering the fact that this is the 4th time we are unable to trade, particularly as small businesses, it poses the possibility of most of us not being able to, return back to business after the 4th ban.
Industry bodies say over 40,000 grape farm and winery workers face job losses.
Wine tourism, that has been a huge concern for our industry, as it has ground pretty much to a halt. since wineries can't open for tastings and nor can they sell wine. We are very, very hopeful, however, that this will change very soon and that visitors will return to South Africa in coming months, hopefully by the summer season, and visit our wineries again, as this forms such a large part of what we do in the winelands.
South Africa's wine exporters showed resilience in 2020, with exports growing by 7.7% as soon as the lockdown eased. With the industry closed again for almost a month, these gains will be lost. According to wine body Vinpro, up to 46% of black-owned brands and farms won't survive another year. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And let's move on now. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, the global tourism sector contributed about $9.2 trillion to the global GDP. It was considered one of the fastest growing industries, accounting for at least 1 in every 4 new jobs globally. Well, fast forward to 2021, and the pandemic has all but crippled the sector. Tourism demand, arrivals, travel, and of course the use of facilities and services contracted by an estimated 74% last year. That has cost the industry about $1.3 trillion and has compromised millions of jobs. The African region shed an estimated $83 billion in GDP contribution and lost up to 7.2 million industry jobs compared to 2019 levels. Well, let's take this all apart with Tafadzwa Matiza. He's a senior lecturer and researcher in tourism at Northwest University. Great to have you on the show with us today, sir. Now, of course, you've done much research on Africa's tourism sector in light of COVID-19. While most experts are pointing to more aggressive vaccination efforts as crucial to recovery in the tourism sector, you say a recovery must begin with domestic tourism here in Africa. But how exactly can the continent effectively do this when the vaccine rollout here is moving quite slowly?
Evening. Thank you for having me. The issue with vaccinations, unfortunately, there's no other way that the African continent can open up as a tourism destination, especially for international tourism, without having most of its population vaccinated. I said that domestic tourism would be important to revive African tourism. This is probably based on the condition that African governments are able to vaccinate at least 60 to 70% of the population. That will allow national governments to open up their tourism economies to international tourists, because perception is very important when it comes to tourism. And for tourists to feel safe traveling to Africa, I think vaccination is the way forward. But once vaccination has been done, for people to have the confidence to come to Africa, to travel to Africa, the locals have to be willing to travel. So by traveling in their own continent, traveling regionally, maybe, international tourists will have the confidence to then travel to the continent.
Well, speaking of perception and looking at previous crises or health crises in tourism, such as SARS in China, we had Ebola in West Africa. What lessons can we learn that can help mitigate the effects of that perceived risk or perception that tourists have now?
I think the key would be to understand that the COVID-19 pandemic is not one-dimensional. In terms of its effect on tourism, there are actually 3 or 4 other types of risk that actually then influence tourists. For example, for social risk, whereby tourists would need to feel safe and consider whether they need isolation from the locals, for example. Do they need to be isolated from the locals when they're traveling to the continent? Do they have the confidence to interact with other tourists? Psychological risk also exists, where tourists may have the anxiety of traveling to a continent where not many people are vaccinated. And there's also the issue of the financial risk involved, whereby we talk about the value for money. Will my traveling to Africa provide me value for money in terms of my tourism spend? So those are some of the perceptions they have to manage. COVID presents a health and physical risk for tourists, but the perception of tourists is multidimensional, And social risk, psychological risk, and financial risk are issues that have to be considered as well.
Right. Well, on a lighter note, many also say that this crisis is an opportunity to rethink tourism going forward in Africa, factoring in things like technology, digitalization, low carbon transition, and of course, an overall structural transformation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Africa has a key advantage in terms of having wide open spaces, having nature as its key selling point to tourists. So in terms of carbon emissions, in terms of digitalization, I think people having been restricted to their homes, watching TV on their phones, on their laptops, are actually looking forward to going out into nature and being at one with nature. So this is where Africa comes in. If we are able to vaccinate enough people to have maybe herd immunity and manage the perceptions that Africa is able to provide a safe tourism product for consumers, then I think Africa is in a good position to actually increase its market share. Pre-COVID, Africa only attracted 5% of global international tourists. So this is an opportunity for the African continent to shine.
Well, many experts don't expect us to return to those pre-COVID levels until 2023. So what are the government policies then that you would recommend to help incentivize and restore investment in the tourism sector and certainly promote a sustainable recovery as well?
I think a sustainable recovery for the African tourism sector going forward involves three key stakeholders. That is the government. The government's responsibility is to vaccinate as many people as possible and then responsibly reopen the borders in terms of tourism. A key approach would actually be to open what I would like to consider to be tourism bubbles. Open your borders regionally, allow regional tourism to occur within that bubble, and as the sector recuperates in terms of getting enough people back into their jobs, getting their businesses back on their feet, then they can then expand and open their borders to international markets. Tourism suppliers and the owners, the brand owners of certain destinations also have a duty to provide a safe product and also provide value for money going forward. And last but not least, the African citizen has a key role to play. Africans need to travel within their own countries, within their own regions.
Well, many thanks for those insights. That, of course, is Tafadzwa Matiza. He is a lecturer, senior lecturer and researcher at the Northwest University. Well, let's move on now to some corporate headlines. Pfizer and BioNTech have reached an agreement to partner with South Africa's BioVac Institute to manufacture their COVID-19 vaccine at a facility in Cape Town. It will also deliver more than 100 million doses annually to African nations and Pfizer and BioNTech supply chain globally. Now, the doses manufactured are expected to go to the African Union's 55 member states. And Kenya Airways is set to increase flight frequencies to Europe following high demand from passengers who are traveling for summer holidays. The carrier has increased weekly flights to Paris from 3 to 4 starting Saturday. London will get an additional flight from 1 to 2 starting July 27th, while Amsterdam will get 2 frequencies beginning August 2nd. And British airline EasyJet has also announced plans to fly 80% of its pre-pandemic levels in the July-September period. This marks a big jump from the 17% in the previous quarter as COVID-19 restrictions ease and travel resumes across Europe. Now, the company says it is confident on demand for summer and autumn travel, adding that it was gearing its schedule towards European routes. And Coca-Cola Company has raised its full-year profit projections amid reopening of theaters, restaurants and stadiums. The company's shares rose 3% in early trading as revenues in North America rose about 28% in the second quarter. Reopening of economies in Europe, Asia and Latin America also lifted the company's adjusted overall revenue to $10.13 billion in the reported quarter, of course beating analysts' average estimates of $9.32 billion. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we're heading into a short break now, but still coming up on the show. We take a look at ways in which Kenya can boost its COVID-19 recovery. And mobile apps are fast becoming popular in Nigeria.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back. Now, the Kenya Teachers Sacco Association at their annual conference met under the theme Sacco's Industry Beyond COVID-19. A Sacco, or a Savings and Credit Cooperative Society, is a member-based financial institution which is popular in East Africa. Well, at this year's meeting, members were challenged to embrace technology and digitalization in order to improve efficiency amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
Kenya's gross domestic product decelerated substantially in 2020 due to the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Loss of jobs affected the saving culture of many people across the country, and this had a knock-on effect on many financial institutions which had to restructure and renegotiate loans to ease pressure on their members facing difficulties in repayment due to the pandemic.
We must go digital, and we are really embarking in digitalizing our operations, including even loaning, borrowing. We do it on the platform.
While emphasizing the need for SACCOs to go digital, CGTN Bank CEO said the bank is keen on partnering with SACCOs in their day-to-day operations, and a number of SACCO banking products have been developed to keep the SACCO industry afloat in these uncertain times.
Technology is helping us to reach our members, whether you are in the SACCOs or in the bank's system, through digital transactions, whether they are ATMs, whether it's mobile banking or other channels, or even internet banking or other areas where you have different challenges.
The core business of the SACCOs is to mobilize deposits from the members and From there, we on rent to the members. So, of course, due to the prudential standards set by our regulator, is that we must maintain 15% of our liquidity or the cash reserve, and this is the money that we invest with our partners, CGTN Bank.
The Kenya Teachers Saccos Association provides a collaborative forum for sharing, learning, as well as addressing operative challenges for the primary member Saccos. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, has removed Salonga National Park in the Democratic Republic of Congo from its list of threatened sites. The decision follows the DRC government's ban on oil drilling and other conservation efforts taken to improve the situation of wildlife in the park. Here's Chris Ochamringa with more from Kinshasa.
Salonga National Park in the Democratic Republic of Congo is Africa's largest forest park. It's home to many endangered species such as bonobo apes and the African slender-snouted crocodile. In 1999, UNESCO listed it among the world's threatened sites due to widespread poaching and poor management. But the UN body has removed the park from that list thanks to the DRC government's improvement of its anti-poaching measures and its decision to ban oil drilling in the park. In 2018, a UK-owned company was given a contract by the government of former President Joseph Kabila to prospect for oil inside Salonga Park. Conservationists warned that the development would disrupt wildlife and fuel climate change. The new DRC government, led by President Tshisekedi, cancelled the contract and expressed its commitment to conserve the environment. UNESCO listed Salonga National Park as a World Heritage Site in 1984 and has been supporting the government to conserve it. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, a Nigerian industrial chemist has developed a pigment to reduce food losses using locally sourced materials. He says the goal is to solve the problem of post-harvest losses amongst rural farmers in northern Nigeria, which of course has thrown many of them into poverty. Here's CGTN's Tessem Akande reporting.
35-year-old industrial chemist Jerry Doubles is putting his fabricated pigment to reduce food losses to work in a laboratory. He claims the pigment can preserve fruits and vegetables from getting spoiled for at least 30 days.
The idea is for rural farmers, people who don't have refrigerators, who don't have their own preservatives, and methodologies are very alien and archaic and ancient. So we want to bring in something that you don't even need to put it in the sun. You don't even need to dry it. All you need to do is keep it the way it is. The day you get it from the farm and harvest, that day you can preserve it for the next 30 days.
In major cities in Nigeria, like Lagos and Abuja, many farmers can afford refrigerators to preserve their fruits and vegetables. But in rural areas where there are less resources, many farmers cannot. According to the Ministry of Agriculture, Nigeria's post-harvest losses are currently estimated at $9 billion annually. This was worsened by restrictions imposed across the country during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. Other losses occur when the fruits and vegetables such as strawberries and tomatoes are being transported from farms on bad roads. This leads to a lot of damage before they get to desired destinations. The pigment hasn't been approved by regulatory agencies in the country, but Jerry Double says it is 100% organic and edible without side effects. Experts are calling for it to be subjected to more scientific scrutiny.
It's not a chemical, approach. It's a biological thing. And that's why I said that if it passes through more scientific testing, it also goes through regulatory body testing in their laboratories and so on, I can assure you that this is a good venture.
The Nigerian government says it is allocating 0.5% of the nation's gross domestic products to research and innovation in sectors like agriculture in order to boost productivity and economic growth. Jerry Doubles is now building a team of industrial chemists to improve on the invention for the local and export markets. Tessem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come. UK borrowing leads to record interest payments. And we get some reactions on the streets after Amazon founder Jeff Bezos blasted off to space.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
No one again began holding guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
The activity, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
And here's a quick recap of today's top headlines. Deadly rainstorms in China's central Henan province have killed at least 25 people. In one incident, floodwaters rushed into a subway in the provincial capital, Zhengzhou. It trapped hundreds of passengers in there. Many of them were later rescued. However, 12 people died. And Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited 2 North African states during his recent Arab nations tour. He met with the presidents of Egypt and Algeria to discuss boosting cooperation in all fields. Both countries are amongst Africa's largest economies. And police in Nigeria have secured the release of 100 kidnapped people, including women, children, and nursing mothers. That's according to a local police spokesperson who said the released captives were kidnapped from Manawa village in the northwestern state of Zamfara on June 8th. Nigeria is battling an increase in armed robberies and kidnappings for ransom, mainly in its northwestern states. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. And now to some international news. Official figures show the UK government spent a record $11.92 billion in interest on repaying its debts last month. Now, the figure was more than 3 times as much as the $3.7 billion in interest payments, which was seen in June 2020. The reason was a surge in inflation, which raised the value of index-linked government bonds. Overall borrowing, the difference between spending and tax income, was about $31.2 billion, which was $7.5 billion lower than June last year. Now, borrowing has been hitting record levels, with billions being spent on measures such as furlough payments, but the cost of servicing all that borrowing has been rising too. Government gifts, for instance, are uprated in line with retail price index inflation, which is higher than the headline consumer inflation rate. And the Tianfu International Airport in Chengdu in southwest China officially kicked off operations at the end of June. It is part of a plan to build up Chengdu-Chongqing Economic Circle, an initiative to create the 4th economic pole in China, and belongs to a blueprint for the country to further open up the southwest region to the world. Now, the efforts on that front expand beyond just another mega project, as enterprises there now enjoy benefits that weren't possible before.
Another step up for air transport in China, as the city of Chengdu just put the final touches on its supersized airport, the Tianfu International Airport. It is reported that it'll eventually be able to handle 120 million passengers every year.
Chengdu is the 3rd city in China after Beijing and Shanghai to have 2 international airports. It's part of a broader strategy for the country to further open up its southwest region and could help it become an international transportation hub linking China with the rest of Asia, Middle East, and Europe.
The concept of the Chengdu-Chongqing Economic Circle is coming into reality. It's an initiative on a national level to build up China's southwest twin cities, Chengdu and Chongqing, to be the 4th economic powerhouse of the country. And there's more to it than just airways. About 300 kilometers away from the Tianfu Airport, Guoyuan Port in nearby Chongqing Municipality also plays a pivotal role as an international trade and logistics hub.
The Guoyuan port area is essential in the economic construction of the twin cities. After arriving at the port, many goods are distributed to various parts of Sichuan via waterway, rail and air. Likewise, the goods in this area are distributed to all parts of the world through the river-sea hybrid transport.
The port saw a cargo handling capacity of over 10 million metric tons in the first half of 2021, increasing over 50% year on year. The convenience of transport is one of the main reasons why so many enterprises find it worth settling down here. As some businesses here said, this strategy boosts the infrastructure in the area and cuts down on costs, and they no longer worry about a potential talent shortage.
The operation conditions are way better than before. The economic circle facilitated geographical connectivity. It saves us at least 10 to 15% of logistic costs, and it's also shortened the transportation cycle. In that way, the return of business profit comes faster.
Beyond that, there are specific preferential policies on land, including taxation, if they settle down in designated districts like Gaozhou New District that are specifically designed for the Twin Cities' collaboration on growth.
Gaozhou New District is a brand new area jointly built by both Sichuan Province and Chongqing Municipality, and is the first incremental step for the development of a jointly operated area of that kind. In Gaozhou New District, the benefits and advantages of the different policies in both places have been maximized. The district operates under the principle of sharing profits and bearing the costs together.
Local officials are hoping that this will be a fresh start to break down the previous territorial rules and create an integrated operational model. 大概 CGTN 重庆。
Now, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos touched down in the West Texas desert on Tuesday, also marking the 52nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. Now, a capsule belonging to Bezos' company Blue Origin made it to the edge of space and back for a good 10 minutes. The successful mission follows one by Virgin Galactic's Richard Branson earlier this month. CGTN's Hendrik Siebrandi reports from Van Horn in Texas.
They began lining the highway outside Blue Origin's launch facility early in the morning. A milestone was in sight. An important chapter in space travel was about to unfold right before everyone's eyes.
It's been about a week and a half that we've been on the road. We're on our journey back home, and it just so happened we were passing through Texas as, you know, Blue Origin's going to be making history.
These folks chose to watch in person.
2.5 hour drive out and come see it in the morning and take a day off work, and it'll be interesting.
Others came to a school auditorium in nearby Van Horn to see it on the big screen.
I'm excited. I'm very excited. Nervous, yes. Nervous at the same time, but excited that this is happening in our small town.
After 15 test flights without humans on board, Amazon and Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos and 3 other passengers were about to venture into space themselves.
This is a historic moment for us. I was born and raised in Van Horn, and this was something we could not miss.
At 8:12 a.m. local time, in perfect weather conditions, Blue Origin's New Shepard capsule, powered by a booster rocket, lifted off straight into the Texas sky.
This is exciting, man. This is history. This is our country, man.
At 75 kilometers above Earth, New Shepard, which was flown autonomously, separated from the booster, then hurtled past the so-called Kármán line at 100 kilometers. That marks the edge of space. The 4 astronauts were weightless for about 4 minutes.
It felt so serene and peaceful in the floating. It's actually much nicer than being in full 1 gravity. It's a very pleasurable experience.
Then New Shepard, slowed by parachutes, came back down, landing gently as scripted on the desert floor. The flight lasted 10 minutes. Bezos said it was life-changing.
On how it felt? Oh my God! My expectations were high, and they were dramatically exceeded.
He was struck, he noted, by how tiny and fragile Earth looked.
It was so amazing to see it from above and to move around. Like, yeah, I totally agree. It feels so natural, like almost like we should be doing this.
I was just laying down, and I was going into space. And I want to thank you, sweetheart, because you made it possible for me.
One person bid $28 million for a seat on this privately funded, privately operated flight. That seat ultimately went to the youngest astronaut ever at 18 years of age. Many hope this type of space tourism will be part of the future.
I think it was incredibly inspiring, and it really shows that we've entered a new era of human spaceflight.
New Shepard opened that door wider. Blue Origin plans 2 more of these missions with paying passengers later this year. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Van Horn, Texas.
And meanwhile, in Europe, the death toll from deadly floods continues to climb, with at least 200 people confirmed dead and many still missing. Police and military officials are continuing to search for victims, while towns in the flood zone work to clean up the destruction left in the wake of the disaster. Here's Trent Murray with an update.
Almost a week after deadly floods devastated northwest Germany, communities continue the painstaking task of cleaning out their homes and salvaging what's left of their possessions. The repair bill from the disaster continues to climb, with roads, rail and electricity networks still down. Arriving in the town of Bad Münstereifel to inspect the damage, Chancellor Angela Merkel came armed with her government checkbook, pledging almost $500 million in emergency funding to flood victims.
Tomorrow at the cabinet meeting in Berlin, we will set a programme on motion about financial help. It is about unbureaucratic immediate aid which will be paid out, together with the state who will pass that legislation on Thursday, as the Prime Minister told me. The financial aid must go to the people as soon as possible, who more often than not have nothing more than what they wear on their bodies.
Piles of debris line many of the streets in the affected region, awaiting collection from stretched recovery crews.
It's just unimaginable. I mean, these are just things, but we know many people who've been much worse affected. But each object here has somebody's memories in it.
This does remain a real multi-agency recovery effort. Fire and rescue services from neighbouring states are here to help. We've got a number of ambulances as well. Even the German military is on scene providing logistical support, and the German Red Cross is helping coordinate donations. One of the most in-demand items is bottled water, because authorities say that in many areas the tap water is still unsafe to drink. Questions remain over why warnings weren't widely shared in low-lying communities ahead of the downpours. So far, officials have defended their handling of the crisis, saying warnings were sent to local authorities. But political pressure is growing in Germany over the government response, with opposition parties pushing for the country to be better prepared when the next crisis strikes. Trent Murray, CGTN, North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany.
Now, many Chinese brands are cutting back on their dedicated male and female collections and making unisex garments instead. Well, garments are no longer defined by gender or predetermined demographics. Instead, they aim to be just worn by people. Well, is this another marketing fad, or will it be a perfect fit for China? Here's Zhang Xishuan reporting.
Oversized t-shirts, jeans that go well on a wide range of body shapes. This has become a new fashion norm on China's high streets.
Young people nowadays are no longer limited to buying clothes in sections aimed at their own gender. Women have started taking serious time shopping in the men's department, while some male shoppers are eyeing women's clothes. So what accounts for the new interest?
I'm a little bit fat, and wearing men's clothes helps me hide my body shape. They're comfortable, and some of them have my idols as brand representatives. 80% of my clothes now are men's clothes.
Many women's brands are now filling the gap between genders, launching some men's products, and giving me some new choices. Around 1/3 of my clothes now are women's clothes.
I started buying men's clothes 3 years ago, when I started shopping for myself. I mainly buy men's shirts and t-shirts, say twice a month, and they're now half of my clothes. They're easy to match styles and they're comfortable.
The break with gender-defined fashion is definitely a young thing. It's an easy and popular choice for people beginning to make their own decisions in life, if only they can find the right things to wear.
A lot of women's clothes are even more good-looking than men's, but because of the wrong size or reverse necklines, I couldn't wear them.
Unisex clothes get around these issues by being designed without a specific gender in mind. And to respond to the interest of this growing demographic, fashion brands are often blurring the line between traditionally masculine and feminine clothing. Some popular Chinese brands are offering nothing but unisex fashion.
3 or 4 years ago, there was a popular trend in China of women wearing oversized clothes or even their boyfriend's clothes. At first, I mainly made clothes for men, but then I found that I could break the boundary. And so I started doing unisex clothing. My clothes are in relatively larger sizes to fit the wide range of body shapes.
Most of Wang's designs come in colors suitable for both men and women: black, white, gray, or light brown. Coats and shirts are the best sellers. She's expanded her collection to 200 or 300 items this year, from just 20 or 30 2 years ago. And her latest releases are already half sold out. Traditional fashion brands are in the mix too. Gucci unveiled a tartan dress for men specifically to break the gender stereotype. Converse has launched its first unisex clothes series, and Japanese lifestyle brand Muji has announced that as early as spring next year, half its clothing will be suitable for both men and women. So is unisex clothing a trend that's likely to continue?
The unisex concept emerged in the 1960s, and it was quite popular. Then normcore neutral clothing came along in 2014, and that made the trend more popular. Consumers these days don't want to be stereotyped by their gender, so the trend may continue for a while. But we doubt whether it will continue to dominate fashion, as the mainstream is still diversity and inclusiveness.
Yao says the key to fashion trends lies in how well brands stick to their original orientation and how well they understand their target buyers in terms of size and design. So it may not be forever, but while it's here, there's no doubt unisex brands are hot in China. At the end of last year, one local brand, Bossy, got an investment worth 200 million yuan. That's something both men and women can enjoy. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, before we head into a short break, here's a quick look at commodity markets today. Coffee prices soaring today as the world's biggest coffee exporter, Brazil, faces some of the coldest weather in more than 25 years, and that has dimmed hopes for its harvest. As a result, experts see Arabica output this year at about half of last year's total. The weather woes also add to shipping delays from Colombia due to political unrest and soaring freight rates that have made it more expensive for traders to move beans around the world. Meanwhile, oil prices rising today, extending gains from the previous session as improved risk appetite continues, despite data showing an unexpected rise in U.S. oil inventories last week. And let's take a short break now. Still to come. Nigeria launches a lever policy to boost earnings from the sector. And we bring you the highlights of Cairo's International Book Fair.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
in Nigeria, the government has launched a national leather policy that could see the country earn about $1 billion from the sector by 2025. Of course, Africa's largest economy was hit hard last year by the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, the subsequent fall in oil prices. It is now working towards diversifying its economy. Here's correspondent Phili Hazer with more from Abuja.
Godwin Ame, a mechanical engineer turned shoemaker, is putting finishing touches to one of his numerous leather works. He says in his 15 years of dealing in shoemaking, getting the leather for his products has been the most challenging because it is mainly imported.
Handmade shoes are somehow much more expensive than the ready-made ones because sourcing the material is very, very difficult. Talk about the financial aspect of it. Those that buy the material from those that bring it to the country, they are the one getting the higher gain because they sell at the very higher rate. So we cannot be able to meet up. So after production, you end up maybe you find out that your cost price is even competing with the foreign made shoes.
Nigeria currently exports about $200 million worth of animal hides and skins, but imports more than $500 million of refined leather and leather products annually. In order to convert its leather to fashionable finished products that are competitive in the global markets, the government has now launched a new leather plan with a target to achieve a projected revenue of $1 billion by 2025. The aim is to produce more leather locally, promote exports of local products, increase funding, infrastructure, research and development in the industry.
The government also plans to boost the leather industry by establishing training centers across the country for young entrepreneurs to help them produce more and contribute to the economy.
Experts say this will go a long way in improving Nigeria's struggling economy.
If we focus on the leather industry in country, the leather industry can potentially unlock a number of jobs that will take most of our youth off the street. We have young people today who are, dependent on production of sandals, shoes. But where do they get their leather from? The leather is still imported into the country. Now, if this is produced here, it means that our young people can source this at lower cost, produce their product, and also make more money out of it than us spending huge dollar revenue bringing these things into the country.
However, Nigeria's cattle rearing business is dealing with a range of challenges, including herders and farmers' clash, climate change which forces the herders to move their herd from one place to another, and this affects the quality and quantity of animal production where leather is sourced from.
We need to address the entire business, cattle rearing business, animal rearing business in Nigeria, if we intend to unlock the revenue that we expect to unlock from that sector. Because there's very little other source we can get leather from except from the animals. So we need to pay very good attention and investment to the production of animal, and the current practices that we have may not help these targets that we have for ourselves.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved a sum of $16 million for the establishment of ranching in Katsina State and has pledged to release more funding for other northern states. It's part of a national livestock breed improvement program to reduce herders' farmers' killings and improve cattle rearing in the country. Those are efforts that the likes of Godwin hope will improve availability and affordability of local leather products for their businesses to thrive better. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And in Egypt, the Cairo International Book Fair is one of the biggest in the world. While it's usually held in the winter break, the COVID-19 pandemic forced authorities there to hold it this year in the summer. Now, the two-week-long event saw some 1.7 million visitors, as Adel El Maroui now reports.
The Cairo International Book Fair is among Egypt's top cultural attractions. The 52nd edition stretched for 2 weeks in July under tight health measures.
The fair received 4.5 million visitors in the last edition. The planned number of visitors this year does not exceed 1.5 million. There is a big drop. That's almost 75% difference from the previous round. This will definitely affect our market, but it's definitely better than nothing.
Besides the capacity, the pandemic changed the feel of the fair. Concerts and theatrical plays were banned to avoid clustering. Organizers have also cancelled indoor book signing events and seminars with authors, the event's main attraction. Instead, they were turned into online meetings.
We are trying as much as possible to make up for the gap that happened between the big number of visitors that we have seen in previous rounds and the precautionary measures taken this round. When the number of people who are allowed to get in decreases, it becomes difficult for people to communicate with you at the fair, so we are providing electronic editions online.
Hundreds of thousands of books are sold every year here. To encourage reading, Egypt's Ministry of Culture offers books at affordable prices for as least as 6 US cents. Unlike publishers, some visitors were happier with this much less crowded edition of the fair. They saw it as an opportunity for them to shop freely for books.
The organization this year is way better than the years before, especially that less people are visiting this year. It used to be more crowded in the previous round, so I had difficulty walking through before. But now I can walk easily from one place to another.
1.7 million visitors showed up in Egypt's biggest exhibition of books, while 270,000 joined the virtual tour this year. More than 1,200 publishers from 25 countries participated in the Middle East and Africa's most visited literary event. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand leading losses across emerging markets as commodity prices retreated today. We saw the rand fall 0.8% as a drop in iron ore, base metals and gold prices added to pressure from broader weakness in sentiment. Meanwhile, the exchange rate between the naira and the US dollar continues to hover at around 410 naira per dollar at the official forex market. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.